Okay, in this short video, I'm going to talk about what I've called shortcuts. They're not keyboard shortcuts. It's just about shortening our code, in fact. So in that previous example, addition, we've actually introduced 5 variables. Let's have a look at it. So you'll see there's 5. 1, 2. The first 5 lines of code, in fact, each one introduces a new variable. There's number 1 string, number 2 string. They store the user's numbers as strings, and we've got number 1 and number 2. They then convert those numbers into integers, and then combination does the sum. Okay, and this, you might consider that as excessive because they're really just temporary storage. They're just storing very briefly. They store a number and it gets used once and then never used again. So one thing you can do in programming is often you can make programs much longer, or you can make them shorter. In this case, we can make them shorter by eliminating or combining some of the operations. So, for example, in the example 12, it does exactly the same thing, but it's a shorter bit of code. And the way it does that is, let's open that one up and have a look. So the first 2 lines are exactly the same, number 1 and number 2. The shortcut is that it does all the there's our original, okay, and there's a new one. It does the adding of the conversion into integers and the adding up all at the same time. So if you look at this line of code here, it's converting number 1 string into an integer, and then it's adding that up with the conversion of number 2 string into an integer. So that's done all at the same time, and then we can print that answer out again. So I've got rid of 2 variables. I've saved myself 2 lines of code. Okay, just by doing a couple of operations at the same time. And I can make it even shorter by, in this example 13, by putting the conversions while I'm writing the output. Okay, this is taking it even further. So this has now got down to 3 lines of code. Let's have a look at that one. So now 3 lines of code, ignoring these bits at the end. There's 3 lines of code, and this bracket, this thing that I'm going to print out. So far, we've seen that using the F string, it will just print out a variable, but in this case, it's not even just a variable. It's what's called an expression. We're printing out we're doing the conversion of these 2 strings into integers, and we're adding them together, and then we're printing that out in the F string. Okay. And I can go even further. I can eliminate all the variables and write the code in one line. And I have to use, it's slightly tricky because I have to use single inverted commas for the input. Now, notice what I can do, and the way I do these things, the way I would try and make them short is, look at this. There's number 1 string, okay? I only need that temporarily. So I could take whatever that value is and put it in here, okay? But the problem is then I've got this string where I've got 2 lots of inverted commas. So actually I need to put single inverted commas. You can switch between single and double inverted commas in Python. The only rule is that they need to match. Okay, so this one here matches this one at the end here, and these single inverted commas match each other. I can do the same here. So number 2 string is just whatever the user types in, so it's that input, so I can replace that and replace those double inverted commas with single inverted commas. And now, I don't need these lines of code. I've got this program that essentially is 1 line of code, okay? What does it do? It prints out a string, an F string, which prints out the word answer, and then prints out whatever this variable is. Okay, and that variable is comprised of converting into an integer whatever the user types in as this input function. So when this input function prompts the user for the first number, that gets converted into an integer. Same for the second number, and the whole thing is then printed out as a variable. Okay, that's I've just done. I've converted 13 into 14. So let's open up 14. There's the code. So if I run that, I still get the first number and second number, and it adds them together. But is that a good thing? I would say no. Okay, so it makes this code much harder to understand. It's much harder for me, and I'm an experienced programmer, and I guess hopefully probably for you guys it's hard to understand that one than it was to start that one. I think that's quite a nice one. Number 12 is a bit shorter, but by the time we get to this point here, it's really quite difficult to understand what's going on here. It's hard to understand. It's hard to debug. So although the point of this little video is to say we've got 5 temporary variables, it seems excessive. Actually, the moral is often it's easier to understand a program to have if you have lots of temporary variables. It makes the code clearer. Sometimes you want to get rid of them to shorten things, but shortened code isn't necessarily easier to understand, and in this case I think that's certainly true.